Canvas session. You're watching a live Canvas Live event. My name is Janie Ruddy, and I'll be your presenter today during this session. So these Canvas Live sessions are presented by Canvas community members normally. I am a trainer here at Canvas, so I do work for Instructure. So this is a lot of fun for me to come and join the community. And our goal is to help Canvas users improve and enhance their teaching and learning with Canvas by giving some application ideas for the Canvas tools. So hopefully we're going to really enjoy what we're seeing here today, and hopefully it's going to help you be that awesome teacher that you probably already are, just make you shine a little bit brighter. And we're going to focus today on feedback inside of Canvas. And our goal is to always inspire greatness with our students, right? Helping them achieve their maximum potential. And so I had written up a little doc as an outline inside the Canvas community, and then was tapped to come and present and talk about it with you today. So hopefully we're going to learn from each other. All right, what is feedback? I think this is probably where right off the bat we all get a little derailed. We all know that feedback is so important when it comes to student achievement. We're all familiar with Hattie's work, right? That feedback is one of those top 3 most influential factors on student achievement. But most of the time, and I'm guilty of this too, I find myself giving advice or praise instead of feedback. So what feedback is not, it is not saying, hey, good job, or giving them advice like specifically, I need more examples in your report, or you should have made eye contact with your audience when you were giving that debate speech. Those are not feedbacks. That is advice or praise. What feedback is should be information related to the goal, your performance in relation to that goal. So information about what is happening and the effects of those goal-related actions. So for example, an appropriate feedback would be, the last paragraph held my attention as a reader because the details were so vivid. That would be an example of a feedback if I were to have a goal of adding more details or increasing my vocabulary in my particular writing. And so very often we kind of get derailed with our feedback because we're giving it or using it as praise. Praise definitely has a part in teaching and learning, but it is not necessarily feedback or goal-related feedback. So what the proper process should be is that we model. So that's what we do every day as a teacher. We provide that goal-related feedback, literally just feeding back observations about what happened during a performance. We allow for student reflection, and then we provide advice if the student is seeking us out or if they need help, we find that they don't know where to go to improve. So really we want to push the students to that self-reflection. If we go ahead and provide that praise, we take away their ability to self-reflect. We're automatically putting some sort of label on it. Even a grade itself is more of a label than a feedback. So just by saying A or B or C for a grade is not really the feedback that's going to allow students to grow and to initiate self-reflection. So to prompt some self-reflection, we have some strategies. First, given the feedback, do you have ideas on how to meet your goal? So again, I might say, wow, your use of language in your essay really made it vivid for me. However, I was a little bit confused when you had some run-on sentences. So then you might ask as a follow-up to prompt that reflection, given that feedback, do you have ideas on how you can meet your goal? And so the student hopefully would be pushed to see that, wow, well, I need to work on my run-on sentences. In that case, they may already come up with some ideas. Well, I can pay attention to more of my punctuation rules, or they may seek out advice, and at that time you would provide some examples and show them where they could have added that punctuation in their work. Another example is information about what is happening in a goal-related performance and information on the effects of a goal-related action. So you might say, for example, we might say, well, if we had, what would be the effect if we utilized a thesaurus for some of our words? Could we use some more language that would make that essay more vivid? And so those are really the feedback loop that we're talking about. The modeling, feedback, literally feeding back observations, prompting student reflection, and then giving advice if it's warranted and the student is seeking it, or else they're not going to be receptive. So the first area that I have for suggestions in order to improve this feedback loop is the gradebook. So inside of Canvas, we do have our awesome gradebook. I loved it as a teacher, but like I said before, just giving an A, B, or C label on a particular student submission is not feedback. That is really just telling them where they ended up in the measure. So that's like if I ran a mile telling me, okay, your time was 8 minutes, 30 seconds. That's telling me, well, my race was 8 minutes, 30 seconds, but the goal is to get it in 6 minutes. That doesn't give me any feedback about maybe my form. It doesn't show me observations. Did I run out of gas at the end? Did I run too fast in the beginning? Things of that nature. So that ending score is not really the be-all, end-all. It is not the source or the end for our reflection. So what we might want to do is in our grade comments area, we might provide some additional prompts. So for example, let's say that I gave a student a C, or a student earned a C on a math assignment. So I might, in that grade comment area, say, when word problems called for division, most often you multiplied instead. That is an observation. That is literally feeding back the observations from their work. Another example, the run-on sentences made comprehension for me as a reader difficult. I'm not giving advice, I'm not correcting, I'm telling them what observations I found within their student work that led to that overall score. In addition, we can utilize the Message Students Who feature. And so in our gradebook, we're going to select students scored lower than and provide our certain score that we're looking to address, and provide ways that will help the students determine when to divide. That would be the advice portion. So again, the feedback loop is model, feedback, reflection, advice. So once I've given that feedback in the grade comments area and asked students to reflect upon their learning, we might then provide advice, message students who scored lower than, and say, well, here's some ways that you can determine when to divide. Or is there a way that can help you identify when you're using a run-on sentence? So prompting some more feedback. So I can use that message students who for advice or prompting feedback. So again, if you're not sure where those are located, I'm going to take you inside of a Canvas course just to give you as an example. And so I'm going to go from my dashboard into a course tile, and I'm going to click on my grade area here. And then in my grade book, each cell has a comment box in it. So that's just one area in my grade book that I can look for my comment box. Let's see, give it a minute to load here. All right, so I would be able to click in on a comment box. We see when we hover, there's that dialog box that pops up. And here I can add that comment. I can give that feedback. Your use of data helped to make your conclusion clear. Or I could say the opposite. If I found that the student's conclusion was lacking, I might say, the statements in your conclusion seem to me as a reader as opinions because it lacked data for support. And so we can post that comment. Then in the drop-down area here with this chevron next to the title of our assignment, we have Message Students Who. And so I can message students who have scored less than and put in my minimum score, and then ask them for those reflections. So I might first, before I'm going to give advice, push out a reflection prompt. Do you feel the use of the data enhanced your ability to write a conclusion? And then send that message. So I'm looking to prompt their reflection. Otherwise, when they receive that grade, many times students shut down and stop at that point. And again, we don't want them to feel like once they submit work, it's done. We should be encouraging feedback, reflection, multiple attempts at improvement, really going along with the work of Carol Dweck, who works on growth mindset. You know, her work has shown a lot of insight into students' achievement, and that their achievement level not only is indicated by their ability, but also their persistence to improve. All right, so our second area that we can take a look at adding effective feedback inside of Canvas is using Speedgrader, and the crowd goes, yay, because we all love Speedgrader as teachers, right? It is the thing that saves us time, but then we can also use it to focus on using effective feedback. So remember, in Speedgrader, whether we provide a rubric or not with an assignment, we have those comment boxes available to us. And of course, we also can annotate over the document itself. And then we have those highlight, strikeout, and text boxes available. I would caution, though, when we highlight, strike out, and many times correct the student work, we're taking away the student's ability to reflect and improve themselves. So some suggestions might be to give an initial score and then ask for students to reflect on their work, provide ideas for improvement, make those improvements, and resubmit. Remember, in Canvas, students can resubmit to assignments if that window is still open. You can as well provide that multimedia feedback. If you feel, and we've all been on the receiving end of an email or a text message that seems kind of crusty, right? If you feel like the feedback you have to give could be maybe sensitive, or you might have a student who is sensitive, giving that feedback using the multimedia tool will allow you to have a more personal connection, and then it isn't going to be taken as a negative, rather than but instead be taken as an opportunity to improve. And of course, using our rubrics during scoring. Don't forget the ability to add comments at the end of each criterion in a rubric. So how can we use these tools for effective feedback? So the first is those comment boxes, or are those comment boxes. My suggestion would be to provide one observation that led to the student's score. If we start to add numerous observations, right? We're going to get overwhelmed as humans. We would as adults. So let's think at the audience, maybe in a K-12 environment, or maybe the primary end, I would probably put one or two. And then maybe in high school, they would be able to handle 3 or 4 observations. And secondary, maybe I would probably max out at 5 or 6. So we get more than that, it seems like, well, I just kind of went straight off the rails with this thing and I have no chance to improve. So think about your audience with the number of observations you're going to have, and choose your battles. Give that feedback that's going to be most impactful on the student work. Another are those annotations. Again, try to avoid making corrections the first time around, and provide feedback to help them improve. Allow them to resubmit. Encourage multiple iterations, and focusing on growth. I had some colleagues who were kind of experimenting with providing not only an initial grade, like we all do when a student submits, but then a grade based upon change, or a grade based upon growth on a particular assignment. And so that really motivated students to go back to the drawing board, I guess we could say, and it really helped in their retention and their correction of misinterpretations or misapplications of their work. Again, using that multimedia tool that we said to follow up in a personal way, especially if we think that the advice can be overwhelming for somebody, and we can put it in a personal context and a sensitive context. And we talked about then rubrics. Again, another piece of advice with rubrics to make sure that we're on that feedback and not just praise or correction loop, to avoid that when we're writing our rubrics. Use them to provide observations of what the student work looks like against the goal. So your mastery level would be your goal level. What are the observations that you see as a teacher, as a reader, as a consumer of their work that would be indicative of mastery? And what are the observations that fall short of mastery at those particular checkpoints? And then what might it look like to go above mastery? Again, if we put on in there, did not use or made several errors with grammar, that is more of a corrective action. We might instead put properly utilized punctuation to increase understanding of the written material. That would be an observation of a goal-based skill, or a goal that they're trying to reach with their writing, or whatever work we're trying to get to. So again, going back into an account, let's take a look at that Speedgrader. I'm going to pull up one activity that has a rubric assigned to it. So I'm going to go ahead and get in here and click on Speedgrader, and show you where, and remind you where these feedback options are. So here's a student's piece of work. And think of right now, if you were a student and saw all of this highlight and crossing out and these markings, that could be a little bit taken aback. So if we take this idea of multiple iterations, multiple chances to come back, maybe the first time you wouldn't put any of these highlights or markings or boxes on here. We would instead give them options to come back and make those changes. And then if they're looking for your advice, use these annotation tools to show them how to fix their run-on sentences, show them where to provide detail. So the first area we're looking to add that positive comment or those observational feedback is right here in our rubric. So here I can select additional comments, and I can make something specific to that goal. Here we go. Your use of research supported your theory well. Whatever it might be. Update comments. They're going to see that comment in their rubric in conjunction with the rating. Okay. Down below, remember we do have that ability to add those multimedia comments right here, and we can also add those text comments. So this is where we can provide those observational items, observational feedback, as opposed to corrective feedback or praise. All right, moving right along, the next area is our Learning Mastery Gradebook. So I have some interesting applications perhaps to use the Learning Mastery Gradebook as a feedback tool. So we know that the Learning Mastery Gradebook can tie criterion inside of a rubric that gets fed to this Learning Mastery score, and we can also attach quiz questions to it. And then those analytics are based on each standard that you either create or tie to a state standard, and both can be viewed by students and parents. And I don't think that very often right now we see teachers utilizing this to share with the students. Many times we think of it as that data we need to help us make good, informed instructional decisions, which is absolutely correct. But let's think of using this Learning Mastery Gradebook as that feedback tool. So include students in tracking their learning mastery scores. And so then they can set goals. Not every student is necessarily going to have a goal of reaching a 5 out of a 0-5 rating. Maybe they want to reach that goal of a 3. And they're at a 2 right now. And so they can use it to create goals in their learning process. That definitely has an effect on student motivation, and also helps to you as a teacher, instead of maybe measuring them against a bar that can be very difficult for students to reach depending upon their ability level, if you tell a student, well, I'm measuring you against your ability to reach your goal, and your goal was to move from a 1 to a 2 or a 2 to a 3, that can definitely pick up their inspiration and their ability to achieve. Another is to change the standard wording. So many times when we put a standard in there, we're using the language from the Department of Education, from our state, or we're using specific accreditation information. But what if we change that wording to be student will verbiage? So student will be able to model algebraic equations. Okay, and so the student will be able to see in their vocabulary really that measure or that goal, that benchmark they should be able to reach. And don't forget to show that progress, however small, and celebrate, while at the same time setting the next goal. So what we're trying to kind of tell our students and model for our students is that we never want to be done. Growth is lifelong, right? All of us are educators. We're here right now in this Canvas Live session because we all want to continue to grow. So if we're saying, let's go ahead and show progress, but also once we reach our goal, go ahead and set that next goal. We can do that. So remember that in our Canvas accounts, where we're going for those outcomes in order to reach our Learning Mastery Gradebook, we would be over here looking for outcomes, okay? And in the outcomes area, you can create your own outcomes. You can bring in outcomes that are set up at higher levels. And so if you're going to transform your state standards into student verbiage, it's probably easier with somebody with some sub-account admin access to be able to do that. But if you're just starting out with outcomes, you can go ahead and put them in here on your own by clicking on this plus outcome. You give it a name, you provide detail, and then you set your ratings and your calculations. Not getting too in depth with it, but basically that's just the meat and potatoes of it. And it allows you to feed that data when you attach it to a rubric to the Learning Mastery Gradebook. So the Learning Mastery Gradebook is found in the grades area again, and at the top I would switch from my traditional gradebook view to my Learning Mastery Gradebook view. So in this way, I would not necessarily share everybody's information, but we can share with an individual student where they are in relation to the whole class. So if I hover here or I show Kylie, I'm showing her that she's at a 4, but the mastery is set at 3. That's not telling her how she's performing in relation to the class either. So up top, I could maybe decide that I want to make my class's average public. I could say to my students, all right, well, if you're sitting at a 0, don't feel so bad, Lila, because my class's average is at 1.5, so it doesn't make that goal seem so far away. So maybe Lila's first goal is to reach the class average rather than the goal of the, or the mastery level of that particular standard that I'm meeting. Okay, so I really think that sometimes we don't share this enough with our students in their goal setting, and I think it's an important tool to help them set their goals. All right, the next area that we're going to talk about with feedback is using quizzes for feedback. And I know this sometimes takes a lot of time, but I think it'll pay out if we use the tools that are available for us in this quiz area. So my first suggestion, of course, is to tie those outcomes to quizzes that feed to the Learning Mastery Gradebook when appropriate. But my next suggestion is to provide real-time feedback based upon answer selections. I think that we use this a lot for maybe celebrations and praise, which is great, but remember, that's not feedback. So what we might say is for answer choices that indicate a common student misconception, to provide the observed reason that the student incorrectly chose that option. We all know what it is. We put that detractor in there for a reason. We knew the student wasn't going to set up the division problem correctly. So you would put in there, oh, when you chose this, you incorrectly placed the divisor in your division problem. And so you could provide that just-in-time feedback in that quiz tool. Another example, let's say that you ask the students to round. We're just keeping it very simple. 5 and 92 hundredths to the nearest tenth, and they answered 6. So you know that the feedback should be, well, the observational feedback should be this answer option rounded to the ones place instead of the tenths place. So we're telling the students the observation based upon their performance, based upon their answer choice. In addition, I think that using quizzes for polling is awesome. It allows students to reflect on their learning. So for example, I might create a quiz that is used to survey the students to prompt their reflections. So for example, I might say, rate your knowledge of the Pythagorean theorem, and I can give different options. So for instance, I'm going to hide that so we could see it. There we go. A could be, I can identify the hypotenuse, find the square root of the sum, and probably explain how to do this to others. B, I can solve this equation for the hypotenuse, but not a leg. So the students are reflecting on their ability after they've had some guided and independent practice. Where are they on this rating scale? And it's almost providing a little checklist in their head, like, yes, I can do that. No, I can't do that. That's where I'm going to need help. So you can provide multiple options for them to select. It's going to increase their reflection. It's going to increase your knowledge on the student's self-efficacy pertaining to that skill. And I think this is a really underutilized way of using quizzes in our Canvas courses. So I'm going to go back into a quiz, and just in case you're not sure where to see that ability to add that just-in-time feedback, I'm going to go ahead and open a quiz here, or start a quiz. Let's see if we've got one here. Let's go ahead and choose this final exam. And so I'm going to edit this quiz. And I'm looking for my questions here, and I'm going to show my question details. That'll allow me to see all the information pertaining to a question and what the correct answer is, so on and so forth. So right here, these little boxes that we see in Canvas, so in this particular essay question, I can put in just-in-time feedback. I can put in some sort of comment that the student will receive. We can do this with our multiple choice. Let me find a multiple choice. I think I picked one without a multiple choice. Of course I did. All right, let's go back and find one with a multiple choice type of test. I apologize. Give me a moment here. Open this one. I know I definitely have lots of multiple choice in here. All right, here we go. Quizzes, sample survey. Here we go. And so I'm going to edit it, show you exactly where to put that just-in-time feedback with our quiz questions. Okay. And right here, so I'm looking at, this is a correct answer, possible answer, possible answer, possible answer. These boxes below those possible answers is where I can add those comments for just-in-time feedback. So we could say here, you rounded to the ones place. We're telling them the observation. We're not correcting them. We're giving them the observational information. In addition, notice my apps are still available here. So maybe I can put in that YouTube video, that TED Ed video, that Quizlet that will help them review how to round to the correct place value, whatever I had used in my course. And so they can reflect on their learning, they can reteach themselves, they can correct that misconception right there during their quiz. All right, so this particular document that I have, I placed in the community, so it's there for you to review and find and access and make use of. And this is basically what prompted this particular Canvas Live session. So again, keep it on your kind of in your back pocket, but also remember to utilize these tools with effective feedback, meaning the observational feedback that we're looking for rather than praise or correction. I just wanted to give a shout out to the sources that I had gleaned some information. I gave a shout out to Hattie and Dweck. And a lot of the feedback examples and the idea or the difference between praise and observational feedback is coming from a document, You Probably Misunderstand Feedback for Learning, from Grant Wiggins, located on Teach Thought website. I found it really informative and eye-opening for me as an educator with my feedback practices. So I'll kind of peruse if you guys have any questions here in the chat area. I'd love to reach out if you have any clarification that you need and help out with that. Otherwise, I really look forward to seeing your contribution to the community with relating to this topic, and hope that you also get involved with future Canvas Live events. Remember, hit it up at live.canvaslms.com and follow to be notified of those upcoming events. Also join those Canvas Live user groups to collaborate on those presentations and really kind of learn from each other. That's what the whole point is here. And don't forget about hanging out in those Canvas chat rooms to connect and reach out in real time with other Canvas users. So I thank you so much for your time here. If there are no follow-up questions, I look forward to seeing you guys in the Canvas community.